to set the world on fire. This is Fidel, the old nerd speaking. Yeah, I always thought I could have been on Baywatch, you know. Anyway, this is part 2 of the digital hardcore documentary. Well, it's just me and my mate Brian talking about Kill Life and what it was like, which we made, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. Anyway, thanks for subscribing since the last video. We've got more, well, I've got more subscribers now than ever bought the record. Anyway, here's part 2. We'll try and answer a lot of your questions. Hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Smell me. Cool. Well, thanks for coming back. So I thought we were, you know, a bit negative maybe in the first part about our experience. So I think my next question, let's try and redress the balance a bit. Who were our favourite artists or records on the label?
Personally, for me, obviously, Future of War was a huge deal, you know, kind of, and still sounds great now for the most part. You know, there's a couple of skippable bits, but you know, as a whole, that's a great album. But ones that I still, you know, listen to, out of Alec's stuff, the only stuff I ever listen to is like the Death Funk EPs. I still think some of that's great, even though it's kind of pretty simple. It's, you know, it's kind of, there's not a lot going on there, but it's kind of enough to, it hasn't been overthought, or, you know, it's kind of some cool vocal samples, some drums, some bass, and kind of that was a bit of noise, and that was as much as he needed. But so I still kind of listen to those. Shitsuo stuff always still sounds great, and it's just a shame that there wasn't more of it, because kind of, do you remember that unreleased live thing that we got from the guy from D-Trash years and years ago? I still listen to that loads, because that's got stuff on it, kind of, it's got some of his DHR stuff, and then he's got some of the stuff that ended up being like on that more Morphine 7-inch thing.
Well, he was a great talent, and he was very unique. And I think he's that record, Shitsaw versus Shitsaw, even though it's like, it's very of the sampler that is used. You can tell what he's used. Mm-hmm. It doesn't sound modern in that way, but in another way, it's not aged at all, and it's still got
out of all of it. Definitely, out of all of it, out of everything they put out, his stuff definitely is way more unique, way less dated. I mean, obviously, you know, I like a lot of the Patric C, Akata stuff. Oh, Cobra Killer, obviously, Cobra Killer are great, but I think they did their better stuff after DHR. Personally, I mean, don't get wrong, it's a great. Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's a great album. But I love the Third Armpit stuff, and it's 76, 77. I feel like they kind of were doing what they were doing a bit more than kind of, or they doing it in the way they wanted to do, as opposed to, I can't help but think after our experience with DHR that maybe it was kind of a bit more distorted, a bit more noisy, maybe because that was the preference of the label. I could be totally wrong there. It's a great album though, and
I think they had to change musical direction, because they played a gig On the Rocks in London. They left all the stuff outside to get a taxi, and it all got robbed. That's what now I don't know if that's true or not, but that's I've heard that from somewhere. So the last time I went DJing, someone asked me, what are your top 5 digital hardcore records? And I'm going to say these. He was wearing a Carl Crack t-shirt as it happened as well. Feel free to disagree with me in the comments. And if I was allowed compilations, I'd choose this one. And shout out to this record as well. I was going through the old catalogue, and this one really stood out, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time. What did you think about other people on the label? Would have been Lolita Storm, Bomb 20. I thought Field Manual at the time was really good, and some of it I could listen to a bit.
Yeah, I think Bomb 20. I never really listened to anything he did after DHR. Oh, other than that Wing Chun tune, which was great. Which that's another story when that song got me thrown out of Electroworks because I liked it too much. But
got a bit excited.
Yeah. Excited in a way that the security weren't too keen on, and threw me down the Electroworks concrete stairs.
Get out and stay out.
That was, and it was the first song he played as well, so I kind of missed pretty much the entire thing.
Yeah, I went to see Atari Teenage Riot at the Astoria, and it was the one where Alec did this sort of Christ pose for like ages. And,
I thought we were positive.
Well, yeah, sorry, but then apparently, and then I played the Astoria or something. I went like 4 or 5 years later, and they still remembered me. I don't know what I did, but they were, you're trouble. So I'm not sure.
So, yeah, that was a really good gig. We saw him. Didn't we see him in Nottingham a few days before, and then we saw him there. And I remember because they were touring with the latest Storm at the time, weren't they? I think. Yeah. But I remember that gig was really good until the end, and he kind of crowd surfed all the way to the back of the room, then stood on like a big cab of some kind in like a Jesus Christ pose for like 10 minutes.
It was quite long, yeah.
I think it was quite high up, and I can't remember if there was a balcony, but I remember, someone climbed up and pushed him off because everyone got so annoyed with it. Some sweaty, shirtless man climbed up, pushed him off there, and Alec was all kind of, he's kind of making noises a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. When he's kind of being wrestled to the ground. I'm not going to do the noises, but anyone that's seen that film knows the noises. But that was similar to kind of what was coming out of Ali while he was kind of crowd surfing his way back to the stage after being kind of pushed in that direction by some sweaty guy. But yeah, it was just a bit, it was a bit much.
This leads on to the next question, though, sort of. Kikardia Trainer says, was digital hardcore a tight-knit group, as in did all the acts get on with each other, or was it quite a disparate thing? I'd say it was really quite a disparate thing, I think.
Certainly by the time we were doing anything with them. I mean, I don't know how it was in the early days, but certainly I remember when first time we met, I think any of them, like face to face, when they picked us up to go and do that gig in Oxford, which was like the warm-up show for the London gig the following day. And I remember Alec and Nick Endo was sat at the front. Patric C and Gina was sat at the back. And kind of, I remember Philipp Virus was there. I think that was the only time we ever met him. Right. But and I can't remember who else was there, probably Pete Lawson. But it was very much, I think they had about as little to do with each other as they could. And there was definitely kind of, I think I assumed that we were going to walk onto this kind of this minibus with a bunch of guys who all liked each other and got on, and all for the same cause. And it really wasn't that at all. No, like I say, maybe once upon a time it was, but by 2000 and whatever that was, 2000, 2001, that wasn't the vibe I got.
thought this next bit would make more sense if I sort of gave an imaginary lecture to some interested students on the subject. Anyway, there's 3 waves to digital hardcore. There's the first one, which is this. This is about 1995, 96 before my time, and it's in Germany. What's interesting is what was given away with the sleeve of Harder Than the Rest. If you look here as a flyer, this is the kind of thing they were going for. Very dancey. The label's definitely giving off these sort of vibes. The sort of squat parties that you'd think they'd be into eventually turned into something called the Love Parade, which these guys hated. And then the second wave comes and all these great records come out here, and what the hell's going on? Each release is completely different than the last, completely changing what the label is and what music can and could be. Digital hardcore was also, of course, about what Atari Teenage Riot were doing, and this was meant to be their big breakthrough album. They printed loads of copies, but didn't sell many of them. After that, the label was never really the same. Here I'm speculating on why the label didn't really work in the UK. I have 3 reasons, I think. 1, the Prodigy were a band very similar to Atari Teenage Riot, but they didn't come with a political baggage. Warp Records were just as weird. And going to a rave, taking drugs and having fun, dancing all night, was seen as a political act just in itself in Britain, especially after the Criminal Justice Bill. There was one last hurrah in America, but it didn't really work. And then that was the end. I'll have to be quick, there's a pigeon over there. Anyway, in the UK it was a bit different, and I guess the UK there wasn't really a digital hardcore scene. There was Lolita Storm, and there was us, and there was maybe Lyons, and it's a long time ago now, so sorry if I forgot someone really obvious. Please write it down in the comments. But I don't remember us 3 playing together, or two out of the 3 playing. And the only time there'd be like a digital hardcore sort of thing would be when Alec or someone would come over and play. You know what I mean? And also we were all very different. So Lolita Storm had come from Fierce Panda, and they were very, very indie. Lyons, he was very serious. He was very good, but it was sort of not what we were about. He was sort of like Christoph to Babylon, maybe. And I think he did support him at some point, which made sort of sense. But would you say Christoph to Babylon was digital hardcore? I wouldn't. But then, what is it? And I don't ever think we never figured out what we were. But that's why I liked the label and the music. It was like nothing else. Yeah. Anyway, I think that'll do.
I suppose when you look at kind of what we were doing, and then what Lolita Storm were doing, and then what Lyons were doing, at least kind of us and Lolita Storm were kind of maybe some of the same thought processes went into the way we approached some of it, maybe. I know it was very different, but kind of Lyons, yeah, it was very kind of, I suppose he was, if I was comparing to anyone on the label, it would be Christoph to Babylon,
yeah. But
who I found out like about a year or so ago that I think when he released that album on DHR, he was like in his 40s or something.
Yeah, that's
blew my mind.
Well, whenever I mention digital hardcore in Japan, his name comes up a lot. Like he's been the one that sort of remembered the most, and I suppose because he took it much more seriously. It's quite serious, and it's good. It's good. At the time, I didn't like it so much, but then you change over time, I suppose, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, he had a couple of songs that, mainly like the ones that were on the compilations, that I kind of like, but I was never massively into. But it was way more contemplative than most of the DHR stuff. But I think part of why, I suppose it's the same as kind of how no one cared about the Maggot Brain album by Funkadelic until the song was used in some American TV show. And now kind of, you know, you get 20-year-olds who are like, oh yeah, Maggot Brain, classic album. It's like, have you listened to any more P-Funk, or is it just that one, you know? I think it's a bit like that with Christoph the Babylon, because Tom York, I remember reading something, and Tom York had been discussing, I think, that Christoph the Babylon album that was on DHR. And I think maybe the association makes people think, oh, maybe this is brilliant because this guy has credited it as being influential or whatever. I think, you know, maybe that could be the case with him. I know he went on to do more stuff that I'm not really familiar with, but I do wonder whether, a bit like you were saying earlier, you know, it's very much, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I think maybe that little bit of a link to someone as influential as Tom York means that people know the name, maybe.
Well, it could be
way off the mark.
It could be, but I also think if you do sort of anything earnestly enough, some people will take it as serious, you know.
True.
But then for me, I think the biggest crime you can do when you go on stage is to be boring. I think.
Well, yeah, and I can't imagine that his act would have been. Again, never saw him live, never seen footage of him live, but the music itself doesn't lend itself to. I mean, we were in London at a time when we were going to see a lot of people like Kid 606, DJ Rupture, who basically their act was them being lit up by kind of a laptop screen while they nodded their head, and kind of, it was nice to be out and see some of this music played out and everything, but there wasn't much of a show behind it, was there? Whereas at least when you saw ATR, Akater, you know, there was some energy, you know, it's which I suppose is something that was, you could hear in the music as well as seeing it live, and was a massive draw.
Well, that's why I like digital hardcore as opposed to sort of other electronic music at the time, because it was a sort of a spectacle, wasn't it? Or something happened.
Yeah.
There was something being said, and it wasn't just pressing play. But I don't know, maybe that was its downfall at the same time, because it wasn't like going to watch a band. And sometimes if you went to see people play, it felt a bit empty, you know. It'd have to be a sort of special thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, we'll come on to that a bit later, I think. Maybe. Shall I try the next question?
Go for it.
Did you really live in Joe Meek's house?
Well, it was true. We did live there for a few months, and it was very weird. Do you remember what songs we did there?
Well, that was like post DHR, wasn't it? That was kind of after Pete Lawton had made it clear that he didn't like overuse of the sampler, and kind of it was a weird time because kind of, I know we were still in contact with them, but they didn't really like any of the music that you were taking in to play to them. And I don't know, it's kind of, I don't know, I think probably became clear to us that it was probably, you know, nothing was going to happen. I remember kind of Alec would be booking like shows in London or DJ nights, and they'd say, come along and speak to Alec. And then we kind of go to speak to Alec and be like, yeah, give me 10 minutes. And then like 30 minutes would pass, and, oh, just give me 20 minutes. And then kind of, oh, I'll see you at the show later tonight. Or, you know, it's kind of, oh, I'm back in a few weeks, and kind of, yeah, things just kind of never really panned out or materialised. But I suppose because when we were doing the DHR stuff, I hadn't moved to London yet, had I?
Well, that's how I ended up in the Joe Meek house, because you wanted to come to London. I was studying there, and I sort of hid you in the halls of residence, but then I got sort of busted straight away. I was asked to leave the halls of residence, and then we needed to find somewhere to live very quickly. And then, as if by magic, the first place that we saw, say, to let, was bloody Joe Meek's bedroom. And then we ended up moving into it pretty much like that week or that day or something.
Yeah, it is mad how that. I think it ends up being, when we moved, I'd been sleeping on your floor at the halls for, I think, 2 weeks. So it must have been after about, and I think we went to see the guy in the bike shop below. And I think pretty much the next day, because they hadn't finished decorating, had they? And they were kind of like, no one's there, but you can move in, like now. But yeah, and I remember vividly, because it was terrifying, when we moved in that night, or that evening, and you picked up all your stuff from the halls. I mean, everything I had was in one bag. And I remember you picked up some post that had been waiting for you.
Yeah.
Took it back to the new place, opened it up and started reading it. And I don't know what I was doing. We were kind of there by, I don't know, torchlight or something. I'm not sure there was even any electric in there at the time. But I remember you just going like, oh, fuck, or something to that effect. And I was like, what? And you were silent. And then you passed this thing over to me. And then I start reading about this crazy record producer that had all these hits, but he'd ends up killing himself and his landlady. And there was this curse attached to, that all the people that had anything to do with him. And it just so happened that day we'd moved into the building where all this took place. And it was that Simon.
It was the DDD fanzine guy.
I think this is good, close to where you're living.
Mm.
That he'd read, because it had been like The Guardian or something the week before. And then by sheer coincidence, we end up reading that he'd sent you a matter of minutes after we'd moved into the
it was
flat.
Very strange. And actually, because I found it last time I was in England, the contract that we had did say 304 Holloway Road on.
Yeah. In fact, I found as well, I said I found a load of boxes that I was going through. I found the DHR contracts and like some of the royalty statements. But see, this is how bad it got with DHR. When we left the Joe Meek place, because I don't know if you remember, but we just stopped playing. The guy that was running the place, I think, changed hands to a different letting agent. They never got in touch with us, so we didn't pay rent.
Well, and then I think we went because we needed to move out. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I think we must have gone about 4 or 5 months without paying any rent there before we moved round the corner. But I think in that time we never even let DHR know that we'd moved, so we never had any of these statements forwarded or anything. So I'd love to know if 304 Holloway Road still gets 6 monthly royalty statements for us.
I did a sort of Google search of DHR, see if they were sort of still going or whatever, because I'm very out of touch. And the company's dissolved. It dissolved quite a while ago. So
really, I'm shocked.
Well, but then it's still. But then if you look at ATR, it still says it's being released by Digital Hardcore. So I don't really know what's going on there. Well, that leads on to the next question. Someone says, Black Lines Din Sky asks, what happened to the label? Why did it implode so quickly, do you think?
As far as like the roster, or as far as the label itself?
Well, I guess he might mean both. I mean, I think we were we were on the fag end of it anyway, weren't we? Really?
Yeah, 100%.
So it was already on the way out, and I don't think there were any sort of new acts coming through.
Yeah, well, we were the new act, so
yeah, they didn't like it. Did they? They didn't like that. So
we definitely kind of. I know that after what was the last record Cater did? Their last one that came out in about 2000, Dwell Only High and Low.
Yes.
They released that, and I think after that, I don't think there was anything from anyone from that kind of, you know, the Patrics, the Bomb 20s, obviously Shizuo, I think, had gone off the rails at that point. But it seemed like there was that. I know someone, when you were fielding questions on Instagram, someone asked about Nitro. I think that was kind of failed, something that never materialised. But a lot of that group, must have got on, because I know a lot of them were in that Puppet Masters group together, and a lot of them went and did that Audio Chocolate label, or were certainly on it. I'm not sure who was in charge of that or anything like that, but I know they did, like, Nitro, Bomb 20, Patric C. Do you remember A-Class? Patric C and Gina's Booty Bass.
I do. It's coming back now.
I think that was on Audio Chocolate. So I think a bunch of people kind of, and I have seen something somewhere, basically, I think Patric C's, if you really want to know what happened to DHR, I think Patric C's the man to ask, because he basically said he thought that, or got the vibe that creating a whole scene was all part of an agenda to push a certain act by attaching themselves to a scene kind of thing, which, you know, who knows if that was the case, but it certainly seemed like half the label went in one direction and didn't really look back, and then it was very much kind of a one band label. I mean, they did that compilation with all those American artists. I mean, it's like Motormark and stuff in there that was very DHR.
That was the last DHR record that I bought. After that, I didn't ever buy another one, because nothing against the people that were on it, but I think one of the first tracks on there was an Atari Teenage Riot cover, and then it's like, well, what? I don't really, So if you're going to do a cover of Atari Teenage Riot on digital, that seems really strange to me. So
that's a strange choice. I don't remember that myself, but that's
maybe I have completely got it wrong.
Digital hardcore stuff that DHR had originally done, it felt more organic, and it felt like it had more purpose and more structure, whereas, even though I know Alec Empire completely disagrees with this, and he knows a hell of a lot more than I do, but I could never get into this. It felt like the American bands were trying too hard to be hardcore. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like they had a blueprint set up from DHR throughout the 90s overseas, and these bands were going to follow this sort of to the letter. I don't know. This just missed the mark for me.
To try and answer the question of what actually happened, I think you got to think about, well, how big was the label really? Which is difficult for me to think about. To answer the question, maybe, I think I'm not sure how big it really was, though, because it was just Atari Teenage Riot, but then they weren't sort of famous, but they were almost. I
suppose they were big enough that they got on main stage at Reading, didn't they? First on, but they were kind of, they had a notoriety about them at that point.
In America, they were the Beastie Boys label put out,
of course, Grand Royal,
and also one of their songs was used in The Fast and the Furious. Can you guess which one?
That was a long time after, wasn't it?
Some of their music was used on a mini disc advert, I think.
Really?
Apparently so, and they didn't like it.
Well, I remember Nick Endo saying that she didn't like recording onto mini discs because there was too much compression. Well, I was thinking, with
that clear tone that she's got.
Yeah. It's but yeah, it seems strange. Yeah, I remember them being on. That was around the time they put that compilation there, wasn't it? Like their greatest hits was around the time of that Fast and Furious. It was Speed, wasn't it?
I don't know. I liked Nick Endo. I interviewed her at that Reading festival for my fanzine, actually.
Yeah,
she was very nice. She was nice. Although when we went to see her, we'll see them playing Nottingham. I think I said something. Oh wow, nice to see you. We can't get home today, but I'm sure you're going to have a really good gig, because there were no hotels, and the last train back to Wolverhampton was like 9 p.m. And this was at Rock City. And the first thing she said was, "Yeah, there's no room on the bus." That's the first thing she said. I remember that. So maybe she wasn't so friendly. I don't know.
But there was no room on the bus because they got so many pairs of socks, I think. I remember
very good memory.
Someone, in fact, was that not Philipp Virus, who just kind of, we were asking to sleep on their bus, and he appeared from out of nowhere to tell us that you need a lot of socks on tour. Yeah. And that seemed to be like a good enough excuse to not allow us to,
I don't ever remember us asking to go on the bus, but I do remember them saying there's no way you're staying on the bus before we'd even thought of asking.
Yeah, I don't think we even needed to get anywhere near the question, because it was already made abundantly clear to us that there was no way that we were going on their tour bus. Well, and I think they had a proper bus, didn't they? Like a proper band's tour bus.
Well, this is the thing, because it was a lot of the records were done really, really cheaply. Well, in our case, we never went in a studio or nothing.
Yeah.
But then for no reason at all, he got it mastered at Abbey Road, which was funny.
I remember I'm saying, because obviously through my life, there's been times when kind of, people, what's your claim to fame or whatever. And it's kind of, it's quite funny to say, yeah, I had an album that was, I was on that was mastered at Abbey Road Studios. But
you can't tell like, though, can you?
It's kind of, if you think of like, what would be the ultimate, like, example of polishing a turd, it would probably be that album being mastered at Abbey Road Studios. But I remember someone saying, this might have been Pete Lawton, that they got a deal with someone there who they'd let them use like new gear or whatever, experiment on using new gear on the DHR stuff, and in return they'd get their records mastered for free or something.
Well, maybe, I don't know.
Which seems like a very DHR thing to do.
Well, even the way that the company was set up is sort of shrouded in mystery. It's it sounds like whoever signed them thought they were going to be like the new 2 Unlimited, and then they weren't the new 2 Unlimited, and then somehow they trousered the money. It's I don't know. It all seems very strange.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'd love to know how much of, because I think a lot of the story of the label and the artists are all kind of, let's say, I don't want to say twisted, but kind of certainly. I never got the vibe that everything was 100% truthful, and I think that's probably another one of those stories where there's probably some kind of truth to it, and probably needs to be. There was a third guy, wasn't there? There was Pete Lawton, Alec, and another guy who I think was in Kill Out Trash, but and I think he had something to do with it in the earlier days, but then he kind of fell by the wayside. It was all Alec and Pete. So I'd love to know what his recollection of all that was. 'Cause Pete Lawton's just gonna, stand behind Alec nodding, isn't he? Let's be honest. So whatever Alec says, Pete would have agreed with. Oh, I got the vibe.
He says, could DHR as a label exist today What would be the same? What would be different? And there's another question is said, but we'll do that one after. I think it could exist today. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you look at Bandcamp, there are loads of sort of groups or people making similar kind of music, but in a more free way. And you don't need a studio, you don't need a label. And there's a lot of people like in Japan. I live here, so Fujimi Industries, that could be an example. There's a Suk Puk from Ukraine, which is crazy that they're doing this sort of thing in Ukraine, in Odessa. So I think it totally could, and
yeah, I think it'd be.
I think it'd be better even.
Yeah, all the tools are there for a label like that to thrive. You know, it's in this day and age. I suppose now it's, would they be able to separate themselves enough from? It was kind of the fact that they were like a legitimate label, or seen as a legitimate label by the music press.
No, that's a really good point, because yeah, it's our stuff was, we were always in the NME, whether we played live or did a thing, and that's quite hard to do. So when I made stuff after, it was much better, but it got nowhere. It wasn't until I did sort of Applicants after then that, and even then it wasn't sort of always written about. So that would be the downside to, but I think that's true of a lot of music. There's so much good stuff. I mean, don't want to get the walking stick out. Well, I'm quite old now, but I'm still finding music that I really enjoy and I really love, but it's not through how it used to be. And I don't know if these guys are famous or not, or it's just all very disparate, but I think it's a great time to find music.
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that DHR could have been a popular, or as popular, gained the amount of popularity that they did get. Now it'd just be, I don't think they'd be touring with Wu-Tang Clan. I think it'd be more something a bit more self-made. But I think that, you know, the music, if they were doing something similar, and approaching it in a similar way, trying to build like a scene around a small group of bands, I definitely think there's a lot of people out there that would be susceptible to getting on board with that kind of thing.
Well, it's all about community as well, and people are much more willing to support something they like, I think, because they have to be closer to it. And I think that's better, actually. I think that's better. Well, that's a kind of a positive thing. And if you like that sort of thing, go ahead and start your own. There's nothing stopping you. I wish I had what I have now then.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And also people, sometimes, not often, but I get the occasional man go, "Oh, I found you. Oh, wow. It must have been so great in your day." And I'm like, "Nah, it really wasn't. All the discs would get corrupted. You couldn't really, you couldn't do what you wanted. It was much less friendly. There was much more ego. It's anyone can do anything now. There's like no excuse not to do it.
Yeah, to like a good standard.
Yeah,
and you know, something that when you look at like the recording quality of what we were doing, I mean, recording, you know, pressing play, having to do a live take of the vocals into a 4-channel mixer and recording on a mini disc player and hope that you don't do anything terribly wrong. I mean, I think all the stuff we did was pretty much first take, second take stuff, because we'd only really got the means to, you know, do things a certain way, and we just had to do it. You know, it's kind of, we certainly didn't have any tools to do anything to a decent standard, really.
Well, when it worked really well, but unfortunately it didn't come across in the record because there wasn't enough good songs, basically. had we have only done 4 songs, maybe it'd have been different, but then we wouldn't have had the release then. So I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, we're gonna have to have a short break. Are you up for doing a tiny part 3?
Yeah, of course.